From the ever-shifting landscape of early modern Europe, we now travel further east, and beyond, to what were known as the Gunpowder Empires. They are so called because they each had extensive success in their military campaigns due to their mastery and use of gunpowder. The first we'll visit are the Ottomans. We had spoken a bit about their origins in our last mega-documentary, as they began their expansion during the 1300s, but we will take a closer look at their journey to become a dominant force of the early modern, with an empire spanning parts of 3 continents. After the Seljuk Turks, a dynasty of Oghuz Turks, settled in Anatolia, a number of principalities coalesced. The Ottoman state began as one of the many small Turkic principalities that emerged in western Anatolia. These principalities, called beyliks, arose in the aftermath of the Mongol invasions. Osman I, or Uthman, the founder of the Ottoman dynasty, led one of these beyliks. The exact date of the empire's foundation is debated, but it's commonly placed around the late 13th century. Under Osman, the Ottomans took advantage of a weakening Byzantine Empire, still reeling from the destruction and subsequent occupation of the Fourth Crusade. In 1302, their first major victory came at Baphius, in the Byzantine province of Bithynia. The capture of Bursa in 1326, by Osman's son, Orhan, or Orkhan, was a significant achievement. Bursa later became the first major capital of the Ottoman Empire. In 1345, the Ottomans crossed the Bosphorus in order to help a usurper against the Byzantine emperor. After a major earthquake, Orhan and his army captured the weakened Gallipoli, in 1354, a town on the European mainland. It was from here that a whole new continent would be open for them to expand. Forming alliances with both Bulgars and Serbs against the Byzantine Empire, the Ottomans expanded slowly, establishing settlements run by governors, called beys, all subservient to the Sultan. In the 1360s, Orhan's son, Murad I, became Sultan. He expanded Ottoman control in the Balkans, conquering the Byzantine city of Adrianople in 1363, and renaming it Edirne. It would be the new Ottoman capital for almost a century. Though the city of Constantinople was completely surrounded by Ottoman territory by the late 1360s, Murad knew an assault on the heavily defended city would be useless. His swift armies of cavalry could dominate on the open fields, but Constantinople, with its impenetrable walls, was another story. The Ottoman state knew it needed a reliable central force that was directly answerable to the Sultan, so Murad built a strong military administration, loyal only to him. The ✱ᴜ system, also known as the blood tax or tribute in blood, was a unique policy practiced primarily between the 14th and 17th centuries. The Ottomans would periodically conduct a collection of Christian boys, typically between the ages of 7 and 20, from various regions of the empire, especially the Balkans. The selected boys were usually the sons of Christian peasants, though boys from urban areas were also taken. Jews and Muslims were exempt from the ✱ᴜ. Once taken, the boys were converted to Islam and given an intensive education. Depending on their abilities and the needs of the state, they were trained in a wide variety of skills, ranging from administration and bureaucracy to military tactics. The most physically capable and disciplined boys were often inducted into the elite military unit, known as the Janissaries. Unlike the provincial or frontier troops, the Janissaries would have no regional allegiances, ensuring their primary loyalty was only to the Sultan. As the Ottoman Empire grew and its borders expanded, this standing army that could be deployed quickly and effectively became indispensable. This corps evolved over time to become one of the most effective and respected military units in the Ottoman army. The Janissaries were rigorously trained, and over time, they adopted gunpowder weapons, making them one of the first modern standing infantry forces in the world. Their disciplined formations, use of firearms, and advanced tactics set them apart from many of their contemporaries. Those not selected for the Janissaries often entered civil administration or scholarly roles. Many achieved high ranks in the Ottoman bureaucracy, and some even became Grand Viziers, the highest administrative office in the empire. Using this elite guard, Murad faced his first true challenge, Serbia. During the Middle Ages, the Serbian Empire, founded by Dušan the Mighty, became one of the most powerful states in southeastern Europe. But it soon broke apart after the next emperor died without an heir. The most powerful post-imperial Serbian state was Moravian Serbia, under Prince Lazar. In 1389, Murad and the Ottomans faced the Serbs at the Battle of Kosovo, a conflict costing both sides heavily. Both Murad and Prince Lazar lost their lives, and though technically inconclusive, it paved the way for further Ottoman expansion into the Balkans, as Serbia became a vassal. A smaller rump state, the Serbian Despotate, continued for another few decades, until it too was conquered in 1459. The next major clash came over a decade later, under Murad's successor, Bayezid. After advancing onto the next target, the Bulgarian Empire, the Ottomans were faced with their most significant challenge in Europe so far. At Nicopolis, the Ottomans were met with a Crusader alliance led mainly by French and Hungarian troops, including Croatian, Bulgarian, and various others. But because the coalition was so diverse, there wasn't a cohesive strategy. The Christian forces began the battle with a head-on cavalry charge by the eager French knights, but the Ottomans had prepared a trap, using their infantry and archers, who inflicted heavy casualties on the charging army. After absorbing the initial charge, the Ottoman cavalry, called Sipahis, counterattacked, turning the tide of the battle. Bayezid then used his reserve Anatolian troops, resulting in a decisive Ottoman victory. With that, the Second Bulgarian Empire fell to the Ottomans. But in 1402, the Ottomans suffered a major setback, as the face of Timur, the last great nomadic conqueror, swept into Anatolia. Sultan Bayezid had to break off a blockade of Constantinople to deal with the Timurid threat. At the Battle of Ankara, the Sultan was captured and died in 1403. A period of instability and a civil war, called the Ottoman Interregnum, lasted another decade. Bayezid's sons all vied for succession, and by 1413, Mehmet I came out on top. Once power was reconsolidated, the Ottomans continued their expansion west. Here, the main states in Turkish sites were Bosnia in the west, and Wallachia and Moldavia to the east. These two states would later unify to become the basis of modern-day Romania and parts of Moldova and Ukraine. Moldavia was founded by Dragos in 1346, and ruled by its first independent ruler, Bogdan, by the 1360s, while Wallachia had been founded earlier in 1330 by Basarab, following a rebellion against the King of Hungary. Wallachia accepted a treaty with the Ottomans, but peace was to be intermittent. During the late 1300s, Merkur the Elder came to be voivode, a Slavic title similar to a warlord ruler. One of his illegitimate sons, named Vlad, was sent to spend his youth with Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary. Sigismund led the failed coalition at the Battle of Nicopolis, and in response, founded a new Christian military order, the Order of the Dragon, whose goal was to stop the Ottoman advance. He inducted Vlad to his order, and so, he came to be called Vlad the Dragon, or Vlad Dracul. Though this order of chivalry wasn't as prominent as earlier ones, it still garnered aristocratic members and monarchs from all over Europe. Once Vlad's voivode half-brother died, Vlad captured the Wallachian throne with Hungarian support in 1436, becoming Vlad II. Once Sigismund died in 1437 though, Hungary grew weaker, and Vlad couldn't rely on them for aid. He then shifted allegiances between both Christian Europe and the Ottomans, but a suspicious Sultan Murad II, next in line from Mehmet, captured Vlad's sons, Vlad III and Rodu, to make sure he complied. One of these sons would eventually become voivode of Wallachia himself, feuding with the Ottomans, Wallachian, and Hungarian nobility. With Hungary and the Ottoman Empire both sharing a large border, the Turkish armies were able to march north into Hungary, the gateway to Central Europe. But the border in Transylvania held strong under its own voivode, John Hunyadi. After multiple failed campaigns, Murad II signed a truce with Hungary, and then left the throne to his 12-year-old son, Mehmet II. Despite the peace treaty, the Crusaders decided to launch a major invasion of the Ottoman territories in 1443, the Crusade of Varna. The campaign culminated in the Battle of Varna on November 10, 1444. But it was a disaster for the Christian forces. King Vladislav III of Poland was killed, and Hunyadi narrowly escaped. The defeat effectively put an end to the crusade. Hunyadi's legacy was continued by his son, Matthias Corvinus, who became one of Hungary's greatest kings. The victory at Varna solidified Ottoman control over the Balkans and further weakened the position of the Byzantine Empire. It also demonstrated the difficulty of mounting a coordinated Christian response to the Ottoman threat. With the Christian armies reeling, Mehmet, now fully in control, was determined to take Constantinople. He constructed a fortress nearby to surround the last Byzantine stronghold. The walls of the city had been impregnable for centuries, keeping the capital safe from external threats. Troubles in Constantinople had usually come from within. That was all to change, as the Ottomans brought with them a special weapon. Check out our last mega-documentary for a more detailed account of the battle. The battle saw Mehmet's army use brute strength with their gigantic cannon called basilic, and cunning, by bypassing the Byzantine naval defenses across land. In the end, the city was captured, and this was to be the new Ottoman capital, which they continued to call the city of Constantine, and declared themselves the successors to the Roman Empire. The city officially became known as Istanbul in the 20th century, but was colloquially called Stanbul by locals, even before the Ottoman invasion. By the 1460s, the Ottomans had taken control of the smaller rump states and Greek kingdoms in Anatolia like Trebizond, and crushed their rivals in Anatolia, and were now able to focus on the Balkans to consolidate power. The Republic of Venice had acquired much territory during the Fourth Crusade, so the next Ottoman targets led to the Ottoman-Venetian Wars. The Albanians, who also sought independence from the Venetians, offered firm resistance under the leadership of Skanderbeg, an Albanian nobleman and military commander. But the League of Leisure, a coalition of Albanian nobles, fell before the end of the century. The Kingdom of Bosnia, under King Stephen Tomašević, was the dominant political entity in the region by the mid-15th century. By 1463, the majority of Bosnia was conquered by the Ottomans. King Tomašević was captured and executed. However, parts of Bosnia, particularly in the mountainous regions, resisted Ottoman control for several more years. Over time, a substantial portion of the Bosnian population converted to Islam, leading to the unique religious and cultural landscape of the region that persists today. In nearby Wallachia, Vlad's son, Vlad III, had 3 reigns as voivode. As a child, he and his brother Radu were prisoners of the Ottomans, but unlike his brother, Vlad had no loyalties to the Turks. During his second reign, in 1456, Vlad was known for his brutal methods of maintaining order, including impaling his enemies, which earned him the moniker, the Impaler. Wallachia had been under Turkish suzerainty since 1417, but Vlad resisted paying tribute to the Ottoman Empire, leading to conflict. Most notably, he led the famous night attack, aiming to quickly assassinate Mehmet. Despite Vlad's scouting of the Sultan's tent earlier, the surprise attack failed, and Mehmet soon made his way to the capital. But according to various sources, near ⴕᴜᴜᴜ, Mehmet encountered a truly terrifying sight. Thousands of impaled bodies, both of Ottoman soldiers and Wallachian prisoners. This forest of impaled victims was intended as a psychological warfare tactic by Vlad, to dishearten and frighten the advancing Ottoman army. The scene was said to be so horrifying that it had a significant impact on Mehmet's soldiers. Although Mehmet the Conqueror had seen many battlefields and was known for his own acts of brutality, the sight supposedly unsettled him deeply. Eventually in 1476, Vlad III died in battle, and while the exact details of his death may never be fully known, it is universally accepted that he met a violent end, fitting the tumultuous and brutal nature of his life. The Ottoman advances would stagnate here for a few decades as they focused on internal problems and consolidation of a different frontier. During the reign of the next Sultan, Bayezid II, Sephardic Jews were evacuated from Spain after the Alhambra decree, which expelled practicing Jews from Spain. They were accepted and resettled across the Ottoman Empire. As the would still nominally retain power through an appointed viceroy. Back in Europe, expansion was still not over. The Turks would reach their greatest extent under their next sultan, Suleiman I, who came to be known as Suleiman the Magnificent. Traveling up the Danube, his armies captured the important city of Belgrade, on the Hungarian frontier. By this time, the Ottomans had been a political presence in Europe for almost 2 centuries, and were treated like any other states, opening trade relations and forging alliances. When Francis I was captured during the Italian Wars, he entered into an allyship with the Ottomans, urging them to attack his Habsburg enemies in Austria. But in between the Ottomans and the Austrian capital of Vienna was the Kingdom of Hungary. Without any buffer states in the way, the Turks continued advancing north, and met the Hungarians in 1526, at a pivotal confrontation, the Battle of Mohács. The Ottomans, led by Suleiman, faced the Hungarian forces under King Louis II. The Hungarians were heavily outnumbered and relied on outdated tactics. The battle did not last long. The Hungarian king, Louis, died during the battle, leading to a power vacuum in Hungary, and the Ottomans claimed a decisive victory. This win allowed the empire to occupy a large part of Hungary, and set up nearly 150 years of Ottoman rule in the region. Hungary was effectively split into three. The Ottoman-controlled center, the autonomous Principality of Transylvania in the east, an Ottoman vassal, and Royal Hungary in the west and north, controlled by the Habsburgs. In Hungarian memory, Mohács is seen as a tragic event, representing the nation's subjugation and the start of challenging times under foreign rule. This battle marked the beginning of the Habsburg-Ottoman Wars, which shaped Central and Eastern Europe's geopolitics for over a century. After the decisive Ottoman victory, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent sought to capitalize on his momentum by capturing Vienna, the heart of the Holy Roman Empire and a key stronghold of the Habsburgs. The Ottomans, still led by Suleiman, marched with his vast army and laid siege to the capital in September 1529. The city was defended by a much smaller force under the command of Holy Roman Emperor Charles V's brother, Archduke Ferdinand I, and the city's military governor, Count Nicholas von Saum. After a more than 2-week siege, involving several assaults and tunneling underneath the walls, the defenders prevailed, with an assist from an early winter and persistent rains. This was merely the first of many setbacks for the Turks. Suleiman the Magnificent ruled over the empire at its greatest height, but his execution of 2 of his sons left the empire with Selim II, known as the Drunken Sultan. His reign marked the beginnings of a period when the Ottomans focused more on bureaucracy and administration, over military conquest and expansion. Between the two sides until the 1680s. In the heart of Central Europe, Vienna, the majestic capital of the Habsburg Empire, had remained as a gleaming gem of culture, power, and Christianity. But by the summer of 1683, the clouds of dust from Turkish horsemen gathered on the horizon. The mighty Ottoman Empire was led by Sultan Mehmet IV's Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa Pasha, and Vienna was the target. The city, under the command of Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, resisted fiercely, but as weeks passed, the situation grew dire. On the morning of September 12, King Sobieski led one of the largest cavalry charges ever recorded, with about 18,000 horsemen, including 3,000 of the famed Polish winged hussars, descending upon the Ottoman camps. The Ottomans were caught off guard and overwhelmed, and the siege, which had once seemed an inevitable victory for them, crumbled. This pivotal battle not only saved Vienna, but also marked the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's decline in Europe. Kara Mustafa survived, but was executed by order of the Sultan, strangled to death with a silk cord. The Battle of Vienna became a turning point in the Ottoman-Habsburg Wars. Following this significant setback for the Ottomans, the Holy League sensed an opportunity to push back against Ottoman territorial gains. They launched a series of campaigns to reclaim lands previously lost. In the years that followed, the Ottomans found themselves under constant pressure. The resulting Treaty of Karlowitz in 1699 marked the end of the Great Turkish War, and was a watershed moment in European history. The Ottoman Empire ceded significant territories in Hungary, Transylvania, and the Balkans to the Habsburgs. The Venetians, Poland, and Russia also recovered, or were awarded territories. Despite their stagnation, the Ottomans still held a powerful empire focused in Anatolia and the Middle East. It had of the time, state the harem was more akin to a nunnery than the Orientalist vision of Eastern harems. Mothers of sons who became sultans would become the queen mother, or valide sultan, and often stayed at their son's side as an advisor, holding considerable power. As the women were never far away from the sultan, they came to exert considerable influence on him themselves. The mid-1500s to the 1680s has been called the Sultanate of Women. This period refers to the history of the Ottoman Empire when the women of the imperial harem, particularly the mothers or wives of sultans, exerted significant political power and influence over state matters and the sultan himself. Several women stand out during this period. Possibly the most powerful of all, Kösem Sultan, was the valide sultan to her two sons, and the regent for her young grandsons. She played a central role in state affairs for decades, until her assassination. Governance was done through the sultan and his council, chaired by his grand vizier. This vizier was the chief administrator in the palace, and though many were born Muslims, as time went on, many were converts, who rose up the ʟᴜᴜ system of social mobility. Administration on a local level looked more like their older tribal customs. Officials were assigned land, and were responsible for raising armies and collecting taxes to send to the capital. the Sipahids were closely linked with the Timur system, a landholding system in the Ottoman Empire. In exchange for military service, Sipahids were granted a timur, a plot of agricultural land. The income generated from this land was used to support the Sipahi and equip him for war. The Sipahids are sometimes compared to the feudal knights of medieval Europe, due to similarities in their roles in exchanging cavalry service for land. However, there were also significant differences in their organization, obligations, and relationship with the central authority. Once the Ottomans captured Egypt and the title of Caliph, they took on the responsibility of promoting Islamic education. Most Turks in the empire were Sunni as well, but many communities weren't. The government was tolerant of different versions of their faith, like Sufism. Non-Muslims were also a significant portion of the empire, including communities of Eastern Orthodox Christians, like the Greeks and Slavs, Armenian Christians, and Jews. These minorities were required to pay a head tax called the jizya, which exempted them from military service, while they were encouraged to convert to Islam. Those already Muslim, though, were forbidden from converting to another faith. These religious communities were organized in administrative units called a millet, meaning nation or community. The millet referred to a system in which the empire's diverse populations were organized into semi-autonomous communities, based on their religious affiliations. Each millet was headed by a religious leader, who represented the community to the Ottoman authorities. For instance, the Orthodox Christian millet was headed by the Patriarch of Constantinople, while the Armenian Apostolic millet was led by the Armenian Patriarch. Nomadic communities in the empire had their own millet, with their own laws. They relied on the older nomadic system of tribes, clans, and tents, meaning individual families, headed by their beys. By 1700, the Ottomans had lost in Vienna, and didn't just stagnate, but declined for the first time, losing their first significant European territories. Decline didn't just come from weak leadership. Other high officials became more complacent and corrupt as well. The ʟɪδᴇ system based on meritocracy was replaced with more hereditary placements for place positions. Local governors also became more corrupt over time, raising taxes beyond required by the central administration. Taking part in European society, the Ottomans adopted much of its culture, adopting European clothing and furniture. Cafes would emerge in Istanbul and other major cities, where those of the empire could consume coffee and tobacco. As they grew quite popular, and were seen as distractions for religious duties, Sultan Murad IV imposed bans on coffee, tobacco, and alcohol during his reign from 1623 to 1640. He was known for his determination to enforce strict Islamic law and fight perceived moral decay. Violation of the bans during his reign could lead to severe penalties, including execution. However, these bans were difficult to maintain, due to the popularity of the substances and the potential revenue from taxing them. The bans were eventually lifted by subsequent sultans, and coffee, in particular, went on to have a significant cultural role in the Ottoman Empire and the broader Middle East. Keeping with the tastes of the medieval Islamic world, the Ottoman sultans were patrons of the arts, and Istanbul and other large cities became centers for artisans of all kinds, creating textiles, pottery, jewelry, and beautiful rugs. During the Ottomans' height, Istanbul was home to over 150 different craft guilds. Adjacent to art was the stunning Turkish architecture seen in their mosques. Instead of using the traditional mosque layout, they adopted elements from the floor plan from the Hagia Sophia, and modeled their new mosques after it. Instead of numerous smaller domes, creating more private atmospheres, pillars were pushed outwards to create large prayer areas, so believers could worship in unison. Mimar Sinan, commonly known as Sinan, was the chief Ottoman architect and civil engineer for Sultans Suleiman the Magnificent, Selim II, and Murad III. He lived until 1588, and is considered to be the greatest architect of the classical period of Ottoman architecture. Among Sinan's most famous works is the Süleymaniyye Mosque in Istanbul, built on the order of Sultan Suleiman. This mosque, with its surrounding complex, is often considered to be Sinan's greatest architectural achievement. Another of his significant works is the ʟɪᴏ Mosque in Edirne, which is known for its stunning dome and minarets. Sinan is praised for his innovative solutions to architectural challenges. He made advancements in the structural design of domes, ensuring that large central domes could be supported without massive pillars that would obstruct the view inside the mosque. The 4 minarets placed around the structure took eyes away from the bulky foundation, giving the mosque a sense of floating or moving upwards. This can especially be seen in another edifice, built later in India, which we will take a look at in the final chapter of this episode. Sinan's mosques, like the Süleymaniyye, were usually part of a larger compound that would include a library, hospital, and school. From 1718 until 1730, the Ottomans entered a short period of peace after more wars with the Russians, Venetians, and Austrians. This was called the Tulip period, and was marked by a surge in the construction of palaces, pavilions, and mosques, in a new architectural style. The period name derives from the immense popularity of tulip cultivation in and around Istanbul during this period. Tulips became a symbol of wealth and prestige, and rare bulbs could fetch astronomically high prices. The flowers weren't just grown in gardens, they became a central motif in art, literature, and ceramics. Tulip festivals, lavish nighttime events where thousands of tulips were showcased under candlelight, were hosted by the elite. With the added influence of Europe, a style called Ottoman Baroque later became popular. The short cultural burst ended with the Petrona Halil rebellion, leading to Sultan Ahmed III's deposition. The late 1700s saw more wars with Russia and Austria, resulting in further losses, especially in Crimea and around the Black Sea. The continuous warfare drained the empire's resources and exposed its military and technological weaknesses compared to Europe. Further to the east is the second of the Gunpowder Empires. Once Timur's empire, the last of the great Central Asian nomadic empires, went into decline, Central Asia was up for grabs. The Uzbeks were groups of nomadic Turkic-speaking tribes that formed after the disintegration of the Golden Horde. The name Uzbek is believed to come from Ozbeg Khan, a prominent leader of the Golden Horde. Under the leadership of Shaybanid rulers, a dynasty from Turco-Mongol origin, the Uzbek Confederation grew in power and coalesced into a distinct political and cultural entity, forming the Uzbek Khanate in the 1400s. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, under the leadership of Muhammad Shaybani Khan, the Uzbeks emerged as a dominant force in Central Asia. Shaybani Khan successfully unified various Uzbek tribes, displacing the Timurids in cities like Samarkand, and established the Khanate of Bukhara. The rise of the Khanate coincided with the ascent of another power. These were the Safavids. The name comes from Sheikh Safi al-Din Ardabil, who was of Kurdish origin, who was the leader of a group in the early 1300s, in what is now Azerbaijan. He founded the Safaviya, a Sufi order based in the city of Ardabil in the Azerbaijani region. This order initially followed Sunni Islam. Over the subsequent decades, the Safaviya order grew in influence. Particularly under Sheikh Junid and his successors, the order began to take on a more militant character, merging its spiritual teachings with political and territorial ambitions. Furthermore, the Safaviya started to shift towards ⴕShia Islam, which would later define the religious orientation of the Safavid state. The militant character of the Safaviya attracted various Turkoman tribes from Anatolia and Azerbaijan, known as the Kizilbash, meaning redheads, because of their red headgear. These tribes became fervent followers and provided the military muscle necessary for the Safavids' rise to political power. In 1501, with the support of the Kizilbash, Ismail captured Tabriz, proclaimed himself Shah, and established the Safavid state, declaring ⴕShia Islam as the state religion, and setting the foundation for Iran's major Shia identity. He proclaimed himself Shah of a new Persia, and began expansion campaigns. Baghdad was seized in 1508, and in 1510, One of their earliest and most significant confrontations occurred at the Battle of Marv. The Safavids, under Ismail, faced the Uzbeks, led by Muhammad Shaybani Khan. The Uzbeks were decisively defeated, and Shaybani Khan was killed in battle. His death marked a significant setback for the Uzbeks and strengthened Safavid control over important parts of Central Asia. This is when, as mentioned in the last chapter, Ismail sent preachers into Anatolia to promote dissent within the Ottoman Empire. In response, Selim went to war with the Safavids, winning a major battle in 1514. This began over a century of intermittent war with the Ottomans. By the late 1500s, Shah Tahmasp inherited the throne as a young boy, following the death of Shah Ismail. Because of his age, his early reign was marked by political instability, with frequent power struggles among the Qizilbash tribal leaders. The Safavids were Shia Muslims, which set them apart from their Sunni Ottoman neighbors to the west. This sectarian divide further fueled the rivalry between the two empires. Throughout Tahmasp's reign, the Safavids faced multiple invasions from the Ottoman Empire, most notably during the wars of 1532 to 1555. These wars resulted in territorial losses for the Safavids, but they managed to survive as a distinct and sovereign entity. Apart from the Ottomans in the west, the Safavids continued to face threats from the Sunni Uzbeks in the northeast. While Tahmasp managed to fend off major invasions, the border areas remained volatile. Recognizing the mutual threat posed by the Ottoman Empire, Tahmasp initiated diplomatic overtures to European powers, seeking to establish alliances against the Ottomans. This led to some European emissaries visiting the Safavid court. Tahmasp was instrumental in consolidating ⴕ Islam as the state religion. He further institutionalized the faith, fostering a religious establishment and supporting religious scholarship, helping to shape the predominantly Shiite character of modern Iran. Despite the continuous wars and external threats, Tahmasp's reign saw a flourishing of Persian art and culture. He was a patron of the arts, and his era is noted for the production of the famous Shahnameh of Shah Tahmasp, an illustrated manuscript of the Persian epic poem, the Shahnameh. In the later years of his reign, Tahmasp became increasingly concerned with the issue of succession, and met his demise due to poison, possibly administered by his physician. After another succession struggle, one of his 9 sons took the throne as Shah Ismail II, purging most other male members of the royal family. Tahmasp I's reign of almost 52 years was to be the longest in Safavid history, and was pivotal for the empire. Despite facing external threats and internal strife, he succeeded in holding the empire together and set the stage for its later cultural and political zenith under Shah Abbas I. When Abbas took the throne, the Safavid Empire was in decline due to internal strife and external pressures from the Ottoman Empire and the Uzbeks. Abbas began his reign by consolidating power, curtailing the influence of the Qizilbash tribal leaders who had often been an annoyance to centralized leadership. With the input of English traveler Robert Shirley, the military was modernized and rebuilt under the English model, with more reliance on gunpowder. Under either this Shah or the previous one, there was also an influx of ghilman, slave soldiers taken from the Caucasus and forced to convert to Shia Islam. These were similar to the Janissaries in Ottoman society. Through a series of campaigns, the Safavids wrested their first major wins against their rivals. The wars of 1603 to 1612 were a major victory for Abbas, as the Safavids regained crucial territories previously lost to the Ottomans. These successes included recapturing the city of Tabriz, their former capital, from the Ottomans, and pushing back the Uzbeks in the northeast. Abbas recognized the economic potential of trade with Europe. He fostered relations and trade agreements with several European powers, leading to a boom in trade. Under Abbas, the empire became a major center of art, architecture, and culture. In the late 16th century, Shah Abbas moved the Safavid capital from Qazvin to Isfahan. This move was strategic, both in terms of defense, as Isfahan had a more central location, and it was a better showcase for Safavid power and grandeur. Shah Abbas initiated a comprehensive urban development program. He commissioned the construction of the Nasha Jahan Square, one of the largest city squares in the world. This square became the center of Safavid power and a focal point for commerce, religion, and governance. Around this square, significant structures were built, such as the Shah Mosque, Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque, Ali Kapu Palace, and the Kaysari Gate, which led to the Grand Bazaar. The ʟᴏᴜᴘᴘᴏ Palace, with its many columns and reflecting pool, served as a place for receptions and entertainment. Artists such as Reza Abbasi brought about new styles and depictions. Portraiture became more normalized and less strict. Abbas relocated many Armenians from Julfa, near the dangerous Ottoman border, to Isfahan, where they formed the new Julfa district, which became a new bustling center of trade and culture. Isfahan's urban design facilitated commerce. The Grand Bazaar, one of the most extensive in the region, attracted traders from across Asia and beyond, making the city a significant commercial hub. The most important trade item was their textiles, which included their famous Persian carpets. These would become quite popular in the West. Under Abbas, Isfahan became a hub of Persian culture, art, and intellect. The Persian saying, "Isfahan is half the world," reflects the city's grandeur and importance during this time. Shah Abbas' later years were marked To their east was the Third Gunpowder Empire, and the last which we will touch on, the Mughals. During the early 1500s, Delhi was still under the control of a Turco-Afghan dynasty, the Lodis. But it would soon be replaced by another. The founder of the Mughals was a man by the name of Babur, a descendant of both Genghis Khan and Timur, two of the greatest Asian conquerors. Mughal, or Mughal, is the Persian word for Mongol. Babur, born in the Fergana Valley, present-day Uzbekistan, inherited a portion of Timur's old empire, but faced immediate conflict. By the time of Babur's birth, the Safavids had established control over much of modern-day Uzbekistan, including the important city of Samarkand. Babur fought to reclaim his Timurid ancestral lands, and succeeded, but the Safavids eventually resecured their territories, so Babur began to look southeast. He captured Kabul, and after another unsuccessful foray against the Uzbeks, he turned his attention to India and the Delhi Sultanate, under Ibrahim Lodi. The Punjab region, at that time, was under the rule of the Sultanate of Delhi, which was weakening due to internal strife. Recognizing an opportunity, Babur made multiple expeditions into the Punjab. After a few initial forays, he met the Delhi Sultanate's armies at the Battle of Panipat in 1526. With only 12 to 25,000 infantrymen, Babur was able to decisively defeat the Sultanate's army of around 40,000 cavalry, 30,000 infantry, and 1,000 elephants. He did this, with the aid of around 20 field cannons and artillery, marking this as one of the first gunpowder battles on the subcontinent. Lodi's war elephants, frightened by the exploding gunpowder weaponry, trampled his own army in a panic. Tens of thousands were killed, including Ibrahim Lodi, who was beheaded. This laid the foundation for what was to become the Mughal Empire. Babur continued his campaigns in the north, before dying in 1530 in Agra, at the age of 47. ᴅᴏᴍᴍ succeeded his father in 1530 at the age of 22. Unlike Babur, who had the benefit of facing a fractured political landscape in India, ᴅᴏᴍᴍ faced strong adversaries, most notably the Afghan chieftain Sher Shah. Despite some initial successes, ᴅᴏᴍᴍ faced setbacks against this chieftain, the most significant being at the Battle of Chausa in 1539, where ᴅᴏᴍᴍ was defeated. This was followed by another defeat at the Battle of Kannauj in 1540. These defeats led to ᴅᴏᴍᴍ losing the territories he had inherited, and Sher Shah Suri established the Sur Empire over much of North India. Following his defeats, ᴅᴏᴍᴍ went into a 15-year exile. He wandered through various regions, initially spending time in the territories now known as Pakistan, especially in the Sindh region. After some unsuccessful attempts to regain power here, he headed towards Persia, where he sought the assistance of the Safavid Shah, Ṭahmasp I. With Safavid assistance, ᴅᴏᴍᴍ managed to capture Kabul and then used it as a base to plan his return to India. The Safavid aid came with a condition though. ᴅᴏᴍᴍ had to convert to Shia Islam from Sunni, and promote Shia practices in his territories. Although ᴅᴏᴍᴍ agreed, his actual implementation was lukewarm at best. After Sher Shah's death, the Sur Empire faced internal strife. ᴅᴏᴍᴍ saw this as an opportunity, and starting from 1555, began his march back into India. He successfully reclaimed Delhi and Agra, re-establishing Mughal rule. ᴅᴏᴍᴍ's return to power was short-lived though. In 1556, he died in a tragic accident, falling down the steps of his library in Delhi, possibly after consuming opium. He was succeeded by his son, Akbar, who would go on to become one of the greatest emperors in Indian history. Akbar was born during ᴅᴏᴍᴍ's exile, and took the Mughal throne at age 14. Akbar embarked on a series of military campaigns throughout his reign, which greatly expanded the Mughal Empire. By the end of his reign, the empire extended from the Deccan in the south to the Himalayas in the north, and from the eastern Bengal region to the western Punjab and Afghanistan. His motives were that the duty of a monarch is to expand, otherwise one's neighbors undoubtedly will. Akbar's rule was tolerant, and he treated his diverse citizens with respect, bridging the gap between Muslim and Hindu. While his Muslim subjects were governed under Islamic law, or Sharia, he allowed Hindus to live by their own law, the Dharma Shastra. This meant the abolishment of the jizya tax. Akbar also welcomed the Jesuits and Catholicism into his empire. Akbar forged alliances with various Hindu kingdoms, marrying Rajput princesses, including the famed Mariam-uz-Zamani. He also included Rajputs and other non-Muslims in high administrative positions, and abolished the restrictions that had been placed on Hindus by the earlier sultanates. Akbar was a great patron of arts and culture. His court was filled with scholars, poets, musicians, and artists. The famous Akbarnama was written by his court historian. As time went on, Akbar began to distance himself from Islam, and later in life, he founded the Dini Ilahi, or Religion of God, which was an effort to merge the best elements of the religions of his empire: Hinduism, Islam, Zoroastrianism, Christianity, and Jainism. It wasn't meant to be a new religion, but rather a syncretic way of approaching spirituality. From his capital at Agra, Akbar's government collected revenue from the zamindars. Zamindars were officials who, instead of receiving a salary from the king, collected taxes from their land, keeping a portion of it before sending the rest to Agra. Zamindars used their accumulated wealth to enlist their own military or civil employees. Akbar the Great died in 1605 and was succeeded by his eldest son, Jahangir. Jahangir continued many of the administrative practices and systems of his father. He was known for his fairness, and even assembled a golden chain of justice at the side of his palace. Any aggrieved person could pull this chain and seek personal adjudication by the emperor. Jahangir's reign is marked by his conflict with the Sikh guru, Arjan Dev Ji, who was executed on Jahangir's orders in 1606. This event is a significant turning point in Sikh history and led to the militarization of the Sikh community under the next guru. Like his father, Jahangir was a great patron of arts and culture. He had a keen interest in painting, and the Mughal school of painting saw significant advancements during his time. Jahangir was also known for his love of nature, which is evident from the detailed naturalistic paintings from his era. As Jahangir had a known issue with alcohol and opium consumption, affecting his health and decision-making, his wife, Noor Jahan, became the true power behind the throne. Jahangir died in 1627, and was succeeded by his son, Shah Jahan, who ordered the assassination of all his rivals. Under Shah Jahan, the Mughal Empire undertook successful campaigns in Central Asia and expanded Mughal influence, but Jahan's campaigns and architectural projects put a dent in the empire's already draining coffers. After a 20-year reign, Jahan moved the capital from Agra to Delhi, commissioning the construction of the Red Fort, the Jama Masjid, and large sections of Agra Fort. His most famous contribution is the Taj Mahal in Agra, a mausoleum for his beloved wife, Mumtaz Mahal, who died during childbirth. It was the birth of her 13th child. As coffers were already low, higher taxes had to be imposed, despite peasants and rural residents struggling with drought. The construction project took 20,000 masons over 20 years to complete. Shah Jahan's illness led to a succession struggle between his sons, Dara Shikoh and Aurangzeb. Dara Shikoh was the elder son, and described as more liberal, arguing for the harmony of more progressive elements of Islam and Hinduism. But he was more suited to philosophy, writing, and mysticism than political leadership. He was captured by his rival to the throne, Aurangzeb, and executed. Aurangzeb also imprisoned his own father, and became the 6th Mughal emperor. Jahan was kept prisoner at the Red Fort until his death, with the memorial he built for his wife in plain sight. Emperor Aurangzeb ruled from 1658 to 1707. His reign, which lasted for nearly half a century, was one of the longest in the history of the Mughal Empire. Under Aurangzeb, the empire reached its territorial zenith. He annexed various kingdoms, including the Deccan sultanates of Bijapur and Golconda. However, these expansions came at the cost of prolonged warfare, notably against the Marathas, leading to a 27-year war. The Marathas originated from the mountainous region of the western Deccan Plateau, present-day Maharashtra. In 1674, Shivaji I carved out the Maratha Empire, which became a confederacy of Indian warriors, initially focused on the self-rule of Hindus. Unlike his predecessors, who were known for their policy of religious tolerance, Aurangzeb is often characterized by his orthodox Sunni Islamic beliefs. He reimposed the jizya tax on non-Muslims, destroyed several Hindu temples, replacing them with mosques, and enforced Islamic law more rigorously. In line with Islamic teaching, he attempted to ban gambling, fornication, and the use of alcohol and narcotics. This shift from the more pluralistic policies of his ancestors led to discontent and uprisings in different parts of the empire. Aurangzeb's reign was marked by numerous revolts and challenges, including those from the Sikhs, Rajputs, and Marathas. Guru Tegh Bahadur, the ninth Sikh guru, was executed under Aurangzeb's orders, leading to significant hostility with the Sikh community. Aurangzeb introduced various reforms in administration, aiming to streamline the revenue system. He compiled the Fatwa-e-Alamgiri, a comprehensive code of Islamic law. His annual revenue was said to have been more than 10 times that of the contemporary absolutist monarch of France, Louis XIV. Despite his efforts, the continuous warfare and religious policies strained the empire's economy and led to administrative challenges. Contrary to the popular belief that Aurangzeb was only a destroyer of art and culture, he was a patron of arts in his own right. He commissioned several architectural projects, including the Badshahi Mosque in Lahore and the Bibi Ka Maqbara in Aurangabad. However, it's also true that his patronage paled in comparison to his predecessors. By the end of Aurangzeb's reign, the vast Mughal Empire was overstretched, and the seeds of its decline were sown. The empire faced significant internal and external challenges, and the central authority was weakened. Aurangzeb died in 1707 in Maharashtra, while still on a military campaign in the Deccan. He left behind an empire that was vast but riddled with challenges. His legacy is a matter of debate among historians. Some view him as a strong, uncompromising ruler, while others criticize him for his religious orthodoxy and policies, which arguably sowed the seeds for the empire's decline. Mughal culture was truly unique, as it mixed elements of their Turco-Mongol culture with Persian and Indian elements. The amalgamation of these diverse traditions under the Mughal patronage led to the creation of a rich artistic culture. Their most obvious cultural achievements have been in their architecture, which blended Persian and Indian styles. The most well-known is of course the Taj Mahal, but the style began much earlier, like in Humayun's tomb. Built by his wife, this mausoleum was the first structure in the world to use red sandstone at such a scale, and was the first garden tomb on the entire subcontinent. Later, Emperor Akbar became one of the greatest Mughal builders, renovating the Agra fort, before moving west, where he built the Fatehpur Sikri, or City of Victory. The Red Fort, built by Shah Jahan, served as the main residence of Mughal emperors for nearly 200 years. Completed in 1648, the fort's massive red sandstone walls encompass a series of palaces, halls, and gardens. The architecture reflects a blend of Persian, Timurid, and Indian traditions. When Humayun returned from his exile to begin his second reign in 1555, he brought with him two renowned Persian artists, Mir Sayyid Ali and Abd al-Samad, who played pivotal roles in shaping the Mughal painting tradition. The Akbar style refers to the distinct school of Mughal painting that evolved during the reign of Emperor Akbar. He invited skilled artists from the Safavid court in Persia to join his atelier. This style is characterized by a unique synthesis of Persian, Indian, and other regional artistic traditions, reflective of Akbar's broader policies of religious and cultural inclusiveness. Akbar also encouraged styles imitating European and Renaissance styles. The imperial library had scholars, poets, and writers who contributed immensely to various fields of literature. The Akbarnama, a historical account of Akbar's reign, was written by Abul Fazl. Poetry, especially the ghazal, flourished during the Mughal period. Renowned poets, like Mir Taqi Mir, Sauda, and Arzu, enriched the literary landscape with their compositions. There was a revival of devotional literature, many texts which were dedicated to Rama or Krishna. The Ramayana was retold in vernacular, first in Tamil in the south much earlier, and slowly spread north before being translated into Hindi by the poet Tulsidas. The text came to be even more popular than the ancient Sanskrit story on which it was based. By the 18th century, the Mughals found themselves in quick decline. After Aurangzeb's death in 1707, there was no strong central authority. A rapid succession of weak rulers, palace intrigues, and assassinations marked the subsequent decades, which further destabilized the empire. The weakening central authority gave rise to the prominence of regional powers. Most notable among them were the Marathas, who came to expand over the Deccan. The weakened Mughal Empire faced invasions from external powers as well. The most notable was the invasion by Nader Shah of Persia in 1739, during which he sacked Delhi and took away vast treasures, including the famed Peacock Throne. This was a severe blow to the prestige and wealth of the empire. As the central authority weakened, regional governors, the Nawabs and Nizams, began to exert more autonomy, often only paying nominal allegiance to the Mughal emperor. By the end of the century, the Mughal Empire was just one of many states on the subcontinent. One major impact was the rise of European powers. Colonial powers, particularly the British East India Company, began to expand their influence in India. Initially attracted by trade, these powers soon established territorial footholds and began interfering in internal politics, further weakening the Mughal grip. The English first arrived in India in 1608, at Surat, on the northwestern coast, and by 1616, had their own ambassador in the Mughal court. Soon after, they had established their first English factory, a warehouse for goods. English presence in India increased during the century, and by the mid-1600s, they had trading posts all along the coasts. Cotton products were shipped from here, back to England, as an alternative to the woolen cloth produced in Europe. The Dutch became less interested in India, focusing on the spice trade to the east, but the French became a more consistent rival on the subcontinent, capturing Madras in 1746. But France's lack of support for their overseas endeavors left the French East India Company vulnerable, and they soon only held a small number of trading posts, including the fort of Pondicherry. In June 1756, Siraj ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Bengal, attacked the British-held Fort William, in Calcutta. The British East India Company had been strengthening their fortifications without his permission, and sheltering some of the Nawab's political enemies. At the siege, the fort fell, and a number of British prisoners were allegedly confined in a small and poorly ventilated dungeon overnight. This came to be known as the Black Hole of Calcutta. Initial reports were that up to 123 British prisoners of war lost their lives to heat exhaustion and suffocation, although later estimates are lower, at around 43 dead. Still, this gave the British, under Robert Clive, a leading figure of the East India Company, a reason for retaliation against the Nawab's army. He led a small army to battle at Palashi in West Bengal, anglicised as Plassey. On paper, the forces led by Siraj greatly outnumbered the British, and it should have been a most challenging contest for the company. But the outcome was influenced heavily by treachery and deceit. Mir Jafar, one of the Nawab's key commanders, had entered into a secret agreement with Clive. He was to betray the Nawab during the battle, in exchange for being made the new Nawab of Bengal under British protection. As the battle unfolded, Mir Jafar's deliberate inaction and lack of commitment ensured that the Nawab's forces were at a significant disadvantage. As a result, the British achieved a decisive victory with minimal losses. With the victory, the company annexed Bengal, and in 1764, after the Battle of Buxar, the British also secured Diwani rights, the right to collect revenue from Bengal and Orissa, which were some of the wealthiest regions in India. While the company had initially come to India for trade, after Plassey, it began its journey to become a significant colonial and political power. Over the next century, the company would expand its territories across India, either through direct conquest or political manipulation. The Anglo-Mysore Wars were a series of 4 conflicts between the Kingdom of Mysore and the British East India Company, from 1767 to 1799. The wars were primarily a struggle for control over the lucrative regions of South India. Tipu Sultan and his father, Hyder Ali, the rulers of Mysore, proved formidable adversaries to the British. They introduced advanced warfare techniques and were keen to forge alliances with foreign powers to counteract the British. But by the end of the Fourth War in 1799, the British had emerged victorious, killing Tipu Sultan and effectively taking control of Mysore. The Anglo-Maratha Wars consisted of 3 wars fought between the Maratha Empire and the British East India Company, between 1775 and 1818. Though the Maratha had initial successes, the culmination of these wars resulted in the defeat of the Marathas and the establishment of British control over most of India. By the end of the Third War, large parts of the Maratha Empire were annexed by the British, and the Maratha princes were turned into client rulers. The Anglo-Sikh Wars occurred later, during the mid-1800s, but resulted in the annexation of the Sikh Empire. With the British in power, they implemented their own laws, including penalties on taxation, including land confiscations. The Mughal Empire continued to exist, but it was never again ruled by an emperor like Akbar, whose achievements remain celebrated to this day. In 1857, as the British Crown prepared its direct rule over India, the Mughal Empire was formally dissolved. Out of these 3 gunpowder empires, only the Ottomans survived to see us in our next series.